Hello there, I am Tolvo. I have gotten a pre-release copy of Hellpoint from Tiny Build and Cradle Games, and am here to give my early impressions of the game as I play through it. With that out of the way, I'd like to give a little summary for those who don't know what Hellpoint is. Hellpoint is a soon-to-be-released indie Souls-like by Cradle Games. I use Souls-like as a shorthand, but essentially it is a challenging 3D action dungeon crawler with a focus on exploration, challenging fights, and learning enemy patterns so that you may adapt to and defeat them. If you need a game as a reference point, I'd say it plays mostly like Dark Souls 3 with a bit of Bloodborne in how the step dodge is used when locked on. Originally, I played the free demo for Hellpoint, Hellpoint the Thespian Feast, after I found it while browsing the Souls-like tag on Steam. It was incredibly rough and unpolished, but I noticed it had a solid core and feeling to it, so I had been following it, wondering how the full release would turn out. Having gotten my hands on it, I can safely say it is a vast improvement over the demo, which you can still try out. Overall, I've really enjoyed my time with it, though there were some low points, notably related to a specific boss fight which I think needs a lot of fixing. Now, I have been saying that Hellpoint is like Dark Souls and Dead Space meeting. You can definitely see this just from watching it. What's a bit harder to convey with the limited clips I can show during a first impressions video is that the levels reminded me a lot of old school Doom level design and how it handles exploration and secrets. Typically, Dark Souls games feature a lot of intricate shortcuts, secret areas, and tools you can use if you find them to better deal with enemies. Hellpoint has done this superbly, and I believe level design has been the best aspect of this game. I do set the gamma high since I struggle to see in darkness, but generally I've loved exploring the large, sprawling areas which often have really pretty cyberpunk-looking cities and backdrops. I cannot stress enough how much fun it is finding my way through all these large levels. Surprisingly, even the platforming generally goes really well. In the demo, the platforming felt like I was going to die every single movement, but generally it has worked really well, aside from some of the wall elevator jumps still being scary to tangle with. Amusingly, before making this script, I decided to watch some of the interviews, and one of the developers stated that Hellpoint is like if Dark Souls, Dead Space, and Doom had a baby. That intent definitely was picked up by me. Often there are large areas and levels, or entire levels without any hostiles at all. These are focused on exploration, reading, and platforming. Wasted space in games can sometimes be annoying, but I actually appreciated these breathers after hard fights or in between stressful zones. The soundtrack normally kicks in, and it helps to make the world feel more like it was a place where people lived instead of just set dressing to connect battle arena to battle arena. I've found many opportunities to get a bit out of bounds, which is a lot easier thanks to the game having a dedicated jump button. Given how much of the levels have collision, even when there are back areas and buildings intended to just look nice at a distance, how when you fall into pits you often fall out of the world, I think this game is going to have some fun speedrun tech. As someone who does speedruns and no-hit, no-damage runs in content, I'm hoping to see what gets discovered regarding this game. The developers have said that as long as something doesn't negatively impact the general user experience, they don't plan to patch such things out. There is a decent amount of enemy variety. In early levels, there's not all that many, but it appears to escalate as time goes on. More often, placement in levels and arrangement of encounters is how the early enemies are used to create separate challenges. The game has a clock-based difficulty system, which reminds me a bit of World Tendency from Demon's Souls. I find it a bit hard to read sometimes, but I think it is consistent in when there will be additional challenge arenas, or for example, demons walking about levels more often. I typically ignore the clock in the top left, other than to understand when arenas will block my path of progress, and I'll have to find another route since I'm not too fond of them. You can find items that lower or increase difficulty in a world, similar to bonfire ascetics from Dark Souls 2. Additionally, whenever you die, you do leave behind your currency, axioms, around where you died. In addition, you spawn a sort of ghost who is a mirror of you with your gear and stats that fights you. When you are properly geared, they're actually a decent challenge as they're good at rolling, going for flurries, and punishing you when you give them an opening. There is a sort of sanity mechanic in the game, which is intentionally obtuse. Its cryptic nature I don't mind too much, though I find the effects personally a bit annoying. If it's actually them I've dealt with. There is some sort of effect I have gotten where an enemy has an aura that causes a slow. It still allows you to dodge, but having an enemy that automatically makes you slow is a bit reminiscent of the annoyance of Stone Knights from Dark Souls 1, though at least with this you can still dodge. It is coupled with the enemy having an attack with a really bad hitbox, so dealing with it was rather frustrating. In general, the humanoid enemies that fight using your animations tend to be some of the tougher enemies due to their speed. They don't become common early on, and I can imagine they'd make the game far more difficult for early game if they had been. I have not yet run into any crashes or soft locks, though I have seen some reports from others of experiencing them. Mostly my glitches have been minor. I have noticed a hitbox glitch with the boss of a location called Zone District, with their attacks hitting me when aimed completely away from me on the other side of the room. It doesn't happen every time. I'd say about 1/5 of the fights it will happen. This makes me think it is a glitch and something I hope can be fixed. I was stuck on the boss as I was getting ready to stop, so I could give my first impressions. It was the lowest point for me in the game. It also gave me an opportunity to try the co-op. Co-op in Hellpoint involves the host putting a hand on the wall to summon another player who finds it in the world. Once connected, you stay connected even in death, which is honestly lovely for playing through with friends. There is no resource cost to summon, which I feel makes Hellpoint excellent for playing through with a friend. You and your summon can both use the breach where you level up and rest while connected still. There is no invasion system, though you can PvP by putting down a dual summon sign. For co-op, you can revive a dead summon by sacrificing half your health where they died. This process is long to balance it, so often during boss fights, the boss will just kill you during it. Hosts, however, cannot be revived from death. With summons being able to pick up items and the items appearing in the host's inventory as well, I've got to say it's one of the better Souls-like co-op experiences, especially since you can use passcodes too. After trying co-op without any successes against the boss, I decided to farm a bit and level up, and I do think the game could work a bit to make it clear when it might be a good idea to level up and upgrade equipment. Often in games, it can be easy to end up too powerful, so people might resist upgrading. And on the way to the boss, the enemies were much easier than the boss in question. With higher damage and stamina, which the stamina came from an item I found in the level, again showing how useful exploration is, I managed to solo the boss quite well. After that, I had to force myself to stop, since it opened the game up much more and introduced large zones with fantastic backdrops and new enemies that kept hooking me into play more. It was a struggle to put it down so I could give my first impressions. Hellpoint definitely needs more polish, and I actually see the devs in Discord still talking about things they're correcting while constantly listening to feedback and recorded bugs, so I'm hoping they'll manage it. I hope they aren't pushing themselves too hard, since even with the glitches, it's still been a great experience. Upgrading your gear in Hellpoint is a little bit odd but straightforward. You have various materials used for actually crafting gear, but upgrading weapons has a simple system with materials called conduits that are a damage and scaling path for a weapon. Something to add to this is that conduit paths also allow you to level up your weapon both in scaling and stats, but also in regards to a linear skill tree. The more an upgraded weapon is used, the more combat abilities and passives you unlock with it. Some items you find come broken in some way, and you can use the crafting to make it back into the original and stronger form. Crafting is a bit annoying at times since farming certain materials or processing them can take quite some time. I cannot discuss the story really, as that is currently under embargo. I will say I'm enjoying it. The game definitely shows its inspirations, and I haven't noticed anything really worrying like ignorant or hateful content. There is a sort of sanity system, but I haven't really run into the game calling it that, at least in the English version. As of yet, nothing has stuck out to me as going too far. I would give content warnings related to gore and certain forms of torture, as well as ones related to general phobias like mushrooms. Amusingly, as was pointed out in their Discord, if you turn off blood, the game in the menu renames itself to Hexbot. The game is good at having a sense of humor. You'll notice it a lot in various item descriptions. I found your bog standard big cyberpunk goggles with a bit of Warhammer 40k feel to them, with the description noting they had no practical uses and that people just wear them to try to look cool. I do wish the bosses had more character to them. They are generally cool and interesting looking, but then don't appear to have much story, at least as of yet in my playthroughs. You have a set character in this game without character creation, which has been stated by the developers, so that is alright for me to say. While it'd be nice to create and design a character, I think it doesn't really hold the game back. You play as a sort of androgynous looking clone called a spawn, who is purposefully generic. I'm usually covered head to toe in armor, and it is kind of a point that your character is like this. You don't speak or anything, so I found it really easy to forget what my character even looked like under it. which is a plus for me since I prefer to play as a woman as I am a woman. Regarding dialogue, that is where I've encountered the most bugs in Hellpoint. When clicking through dialogue, I've had the voices constantly break. It's not too big of a deal since the game uses a fictional language which sounds like it is Russian and German inspired to me. At times dialogue trees can also just break. I've even encountered moments where characters give me dialogue options as if I've already found an item I have not yet, who then just break for a bit when it's recognized I haven't found that item. The names of bosses are also very hard for me to read below 1080p. Text could use a bit starker of a border as sometimes it is hard to read. For those curious if they can run this game, I run it quite well on a Nitro 5 Acer laptop at 1920 by 1080. The game, despite all of its content, is actually 5 gigabytes with a little bit of extra space taken seemingly by saves. It loads really fast, which is quite nice, as when you rest at your checkpoints, it doesn't actually reset the enemies in the level. So quitting and reloading is the best way to farm, which ends up going faster than running back to a bonfire in a Souls game. I try to look for indie Souls-likes often, as I love these kinds of games, but I'd love to see more studios making them other than just FromSoft or the few others that exist. Hellpoint, I think, really benefits from having realistic expectations of the developers trying to focus on a concept and working on that over attaching all sorts of unnecessary concepts that might not work well with the full system. It is focused in what it is. I look forward to playing more of Hellpoint. I think it is one of the better indie Souls-likes I've played. I'm not entirely sure how long the game is, but with what I've seen so far, I think it is worth it to pick the game up if you enjoy these sorts of games, and especially if you want something to co-op through with a friend. It is still buggy, with most bugs I experience being humorous outside of hitbox issues. So if that does really bother you, it might be a good idea to wait a bit for patches to come out as the developers are regularly fixing things. Still, if you can deal with corpses flopping about or enemies sometimes spinning in place, it's a really fun experience. It is coming out on the 30th of July 2020, and I'm hoping to try to have my review up a bit before then. Bye bye for now.